Welcome, everybody. My name is Christine Zhou, and I'm a staff psychologist at Counseling and Psychological Services here on campus, but also I'm the lead satellite office counselor in engineering. I've been working at a college since 2012, mainly individually with undergraduate students and graduate students, but also I provide consultation to faculty and staff on student concerns. Reflecting on the times that I spent here at Berkeley Engineering, I think the most common thing I've heard from students who came to see me is that for the longest time, they feel like they are the only one who struggles, and they are struggling alone because they don't think other people would understand or know where or how to get help. And also aware that the students who actually came to see me are only a fraction of the students who might have been feeling similarly. Therefore, we're hoping to find a way to reach out to a larger audience to talk about mental wellness and share our experiences, and also to discuss how to get help. In addition, I also want to acknowledge that 2020 has been a really tough time for everybody with the COVID pandemic and all the social political changes happening here in the United States and around the world. Mental well-being has become an increasingly important and relevant topic for all of us. Under these contexts, and that's why we're launching a series called Let's Talk here at Berkeley Engineering to promote mental wellness. So today, we're introducing the topic and open up conversations around mental wellness with Dr. Lisa Pruitt and Dr. Sonia Travaglini. In March, we'll host a panel discussion on imposter syndrome. And in April, we'll offer a mini retreat of self-care techniques and featuring mindfulness. The purpose of these series is to openly acknowledge challenges that are facing our students, sharing our stories, promoting a culture where we can care for ourselves, but also care for each other as part of the Berkeley Engineering community. So a little bit of housekeeping. We're doing this through webinar. If you want to ask questions, and there is a question and answer button under your Zoom. And so that's where you can submit questions, and we'll keep track of the questions that comes up. We'll try to answer them as much as we can today during the session, but if we don't get to all of them, we'll collect them and then we'll find a way to respond to these questions even after the session. So without further ado, why don't I turn the table to our panelists, and we have two guests today, Sonia and Lisa. So Sonia, you want to start introducing yourself?
I'd love to. Thank you so much, Christine, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here for the Let's Talk series. As Christine mentioned, I'm Dr. Sonia Travaglini. I go by Dr. Sonia as it's a little easier. And I'm the Learning and Success Specialist here with the Engineering Student Services at UC Berkeley. So my role is to help people optimize how they learn, find tips and tricks to make it a bit easier to get success at Berkeley, and also cope with the stresses that studying brings. I completed my PhD in mechanical engineering right here at UC Berkeley, go Bears. So I know a little bit about the stresses and trials that you go through as a student. And so I'm delighted to share with you today some things that can help a little bit.
Thank you, Sonia. Lisa.
Well, thank you so much for including me in this workshop. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I've been on the faculty of mechanical engineering since 1993. I came straight out of grad school, so you can just imagine imposter syndrome, anxiety, uncertainty, everything that went with it. I used to walk the campus for an hour before my lecture just to try to give myself a pep talk, because I was teaching students that were roughly the same age as me. And I was probably, of that mindset of, oh my gosh, like, what are they going to think? So just that immense anxiety. And what's interesting is I think anxiety has been something that's been in my life since childhood. And it's something that I now manage. I have tools, and I'll be happy to share those as we go further. But I think there's many emotions that undergraduates and graduates face. And I've experienced a good number of them. And it's often when I hear the little knock at my door and someone comes in alone and says, Professor Pruitt, can I talk to you about something? And they'll come in, and first I'm always just so impressed that they have that trust with me and that I can be a safe space for them to come and speak. And then they'll share something. And whether that something is their struggle with anxiety, their struggles with depression, feeling worthy, feeling like an imposter, maybe struggle with an addiction, struggle with an eating disorder, I can say, have a seat, because I've experienced all of those. And when I can open my heart space to the student, they know they're not alone. And then I can reach out and offer other resources that are available to them. And that's in part how I reached out to Christine to see if I could be of help. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I really, truly appreciate it. It's such a rare opportunity, I think, to hear from a faculty member to openly talk about these issues that usually, I think, in this community, it's such a taboo. A lot of students don't want to talk about it. And so thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much, Sonia. Being a Berkeley grad, you probably have the firsthand experience, what's it like to be here at Berkeley. So we're honored to have both of you. I also want to introduce my colleague, Dr. Janae Jackson, and she is also one of the counselors here at Berkeley Engineering. And Dr. Jackson was having a little bit of hard time getting on the Zoom, and we're finally happy to have you. And so you want us to just say a couple words, who you are? And...
Hi, yes, I'm Janae Jackson, and I am psychologist on staff at Counseling and Psych Services. And of course, 50% of my time is with the College of Engineering over the past year, which has been great. And so I'm happy to be here, and I'm really sorry, to kind of insert myself at this moment in the beginning, but I needed to get hosting status. I was in the webinar, but I was in the webinar as a participant. So,
Nice.
But I will be more so in the background, and I will be looking at the chat and, kind of taking questions and trying to help facilitate getting answers to your questions. So happy to be here.
All right. So now we've introduced our panelists, and what we'll do is that we prepare some questions maybe as a conversation starter. These are some of the questions I think usually comes up when we work with students. And so we'll throw it out there, but feel free as you're listening, if something comes up to you, please put it in the Q&A. Like Janae said, and she will be tracking it, and we will be feeding the questions to the panelists and as we're going along. So first of all, the first question, I guess in your own experience and maybe your experience working with students here at Berkeley Engineering, what do you think are some of the common challenges facing our students?
I'll take that first. I think engineering is a rigorous curriculum, and Berkeley, of course, is at the top of that. So I think one of the things that I observe with students is that the rigor of our curriculum, asks a lot. It asks a lot of our students in terms of time and in terms of energy. So I think there's often this sense of anxiety. There's always something to do. There's always something that they have to catch up on. There's always this sense of urgency. So I think foremost, one of the things that I hear most from students is really this challenge with anxiety that comes from the rigor of our curriculum and the competitiveness that they feel in our curriculum. So I think that's really at the top. And right under that would be, of course, many students feel like imposters. They maybe have struggle and they may question whether they belong here. And of course they do. And every struggle they have, they often feel like they're alone in that struggle. And of course they're not. There are many. So I think those, for me as a faculty member, those are the pieces that I see foremost that show up at my office hours.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm actually going to echo that as well, because, there's so many good opportunities at Berkeley, whether it's in the classes or the student clubs and all of those allied clubs like sports and things you can do. And then also just all of the activities that you can get involved in with volunteering. There's literally an endless amount of cool things to do. But this means students often are simply overwhelmed and as Lisa said, can't quite get everything. And I think we're all used to kind of living in that space. And so something students often really have to upskill in to be able to cope with that is prioritizing. So when you have 50 things to do, all with different deadlines, how do you find a method to know just to make it into a manageable set that you can nibble away at? And my personal favorite is just selecting 2 or 3 goals per day, just 2 or 3 actions. And when you shrink it down to a daily size like that, it's a little easier. So again, yes, definitely the anxiety and coping, but also those skills of time management and organization.
I really love how Sonia not only state the problem, but also offer the solution to engineering problem solving sort of mindset. So I think there is the second question, maybe I will sort of combine with the third one. The second one asked is more about very similarly, very related to the first one. So a lot of students do struggle with anxiety or maybe depression. What do you think, in your own experience or experience working with students, what's the impact of mental wellness on their academic performance and personal lives? And then what do you think are some of the tips that you can offer the students to manage that? Actually, we just had a question coming through the Q&A who's specifically asking that. You know, the student says that they're struggling quite a lot with anxiety, maybe potentially diagnosing with ADD, and then that's impacting their academic performance. So they are putting up probation. So it's almost sort of feels like, how can I take care of my mental health, but at the same time making progress on academic? And it seems like very punitive because it's almost like I'm a failure because I couldn't perform, but I'm struggling so much. So I'm just curious if folks have a response.
So I'll start. I think one of the things that I see in terms of impact is obviously the anxiety shows up, and it shows up around test taking. It shows up around deadlines. It impacts students' sense of who they are as a person, which then often manifests in how they can show up on a team. And I'm also thinking this translates to personal life, because it's hard to carry a lot of anxiety around any part of our life and not carry that home with us, especially now when we're kind of living at work, working at school. It's all kind of the same, and it's a real challenge. One of the practices, even for myself, because I think even as faculty, we carry an immense amount on our plates, is just reminding ourselves that we have only 7 days a week, only 24 hours in a day. We have to take care of our health, because to have good health is where you have the greatest access to your knowledge. So when we get stressed and anxiety builds, and I see this even in our doctoral students, the level of anxiety actually starts to squeeze off access to this lifetime of knowledge that we've been accumulating. So deep breathing is really powerful, some type of meditative practice, or getting physical exercise every day and making a commitment to that. For me, that's been really a life changer, is committing to having physical exercise every single day. For me, it's in the morning, and I have spoken with the Wellness Club. For me, it's like brushing one's teeth. I don't question it. I don't necessarily have to feel like I want to do it that day, but it's something that I make a commitment to. And I know that I'll feel better once I do it. And I know that that 1 hour that I devote to that part of my life will carry forth. It will help me keep my anxiety at bay. It will keep my heart rate down. And it lets me go on and be more efficient with the rest of the parts of all the things that I have to address. So I think it's really important to carve out best practices for oneself that actually help mitigate a lot of our anxiety. And that will actually make you more efficient in other places, whether that's studying or whether that's meeting deadlines, and also just having access to the knowledge that you're carrying in the body. I'm also a big fan of the timer. If we've got homework sets, we've got various tasks that are on us, it can be really powerful to set the kitchen timer, to set the phone timer, to have a digital clock, something that says, I'm going to work on this for 1 hour, and then hold yourself to that, take a break. And I think it's too easy to keep pushing past our boundaries And then we start losing momentum and we start draining our energy and resources. We get frustrated, things get harder. So you can actually be more efficient with your time if you do it in manageable chunks. So I know Dr. Sonia's got even more to share on those domains.
Thank you, Lisa. And I want to echo again that thought that, you know, it is about self-care. And I often think of it rather like university as almost being like a sort of Olympic event where you're an athlete, you're at the #1 public institution in the USA. You've got in here, so you know already that you're very talented and very capable at studying and learning as well. But it takes effort to be an athlete. It takes effort to run a race. It depletes the energy in your body and it wears you long term, just like endurance running. So we can almost think of ourselves like Olympic athletes, and that we have to not only, as Lisa said, break the work we're doing down into smaller chunks, but also have uprated self-care to mitigate some of that impact on us. Tracy, would you advance to the next slide? Because I wanted to mention as well just how normal it is to feel these reactions of stress, of anxiety, of feeling overwhelmed. So this is actually a survey by the American College Health Association, pretty recent, 2019. And you can also contact us for these results if you want to dive into the data yourself. And you can see here that 88% of those respondents felt overwhelmed, 85 exhausted, 67 very lonely, 66 totally overwhelming anxiety, and then nearly half, 46%, felt so depressed that it is difficult to function. The reason I'm sharing all of these rather shocking, really, stats is to show you that your experiences are a normal reaction to the very difficult undertaking you're doing. And so being able to not only understand that this is normal, but more about helping solve around those problems continuously is one of the best ways that we can address this. Personally, one of the things I do is I really like Lisa's idea about the timer. And I had a great question as well in the chat about saying that you can suffer analysis paralysis. So when you have so many problems and you're so overwhelmed, how do you even start? Where do you even start? My personal favorite is to make a massive list of everything that is annoying me or is a problem. And that could be from a big problem like, you know, academic probation, right the way down to I'm really sick of not having, my chair is not comfortable, big or small thing, everything that's impacting you. And from those, you can start to distill down to the ones that you can address with extra help, for example, in counseling, contacting CAPS. Are they fixable things where you could ask for help from others? Or they may just be problems that are structural barriers that you can't remove, but you may be able to edit your biofeedback to that or your mental response to those stresses through those coping techniques such as deep breathing, taking a quick walk, or if nothing else, having a damn good whinge to a good friend to let out some of that stress. Also, if you have lots of opportunities, maybe you have the converse problem, too much is going on, you don't know what to focus on, you're an achiever, but you're probably an overachiever being here at Berkeley. How do you know what to do and what's most useful? A great way is to also make a decision matrix. So it's effectively a set of rows and a set of columns where you put all of the different opportunities or options that you have, and then you rank them and give them a weighted number, maybe 1 to 5, on say how much effort it takes, how much time it will take. Is it worth money? How much is it going to add to your career? And then as you sum up at the bottom or on the rows, you'll be able to see which of those is the most immediate that you need to deal with or the most immediate you need to go on. So yes, it is super, super normal to feel overwhelmed, depressed, stressed, etc. And this is seen in many industries as well. You know, if you think about other people who work in high stress or high performance industries, race car drivers, for example, also suffer, a lot of feedback from what they're doing. I also wanted to give a small nod to a question that we had shared with us, which is, as someone mentioned, if you're on academic probation, How do you deal with this situation when you feel like you're actually being pushed back? And something I wanted to highlight that is academic probation is really there to take a pause, so is that you're not continuing to try keep running this mill on this treadmill of yet more and more classes when some of those barriers are in your way. The probation is there to get a sense of what exactly you can fix, and if it's barriers that are structural and you can't fix, how you can solve around those. And I wanted to mention that even the worst possible outcome, withdrawal, is not a finish to your university degree pursuance. You are joined here at Berkeley, you are part of the Bears family, and that means that you can re-enter and pick your studies back up once you have found solutions to some of those barriers. So top tips: it's normal to feel terrible. The best thing is to find some coping mechanisms, such as making a list or chunking it down to a few tasks with a timer. Great idea from Lisa. And then also knowing that the worst case scenarios are ones that are also solvable.
I really appreciate that, Sonia. That's such a summarizing, I mean, it's an engineering mindset. And I also wanted to say, I mean, there's a question coming through chat, and thank you so much, Sonia, for picking it up. And I think Tracy, if you go to the next slide, and actually that sort of ties with the fourth questions we have here. I mean, it is a very common thing that we see when students come to get help. They say, I barely have time to eat. I barely have time to sleep. I could not finish my problem sets. I have 5 exams, all these responsibilities, and I just don't seem to be able to allow myself, give myself permission to even take a break. I understand it's important to eat, to sleep, but I couldn't juggle these responsibilities. So it's almost like asking more from somebody who is already feeling exhausted. And so I'm just curious, have you guys personally had experience like this, and, or hear students struggle with that? And what kind of things will you say?
So first, I wanted to say this. I worked myself right into full-on burnout. So I know what it's like to push oneself right past that brink, and to do it for so many years that your body ultimately just decides it cannot and will not work that way anymore. So anything I can do to advocate for health and well-being for our young students, our graduate students, our young faculty, our staff, it is preeminent. Because once you bring your body to the brink, when you starve it of good food and you starve it of rest, and you don't prioritize taking good care, getting physical exercise, you have to come back from that. And it's a constant catch up. And for me, it's something that I'm always now prone to, of this adrenal exhaustion, that I really worked myself into this deep hole. And I just didn't have coping tools. And so it's one of those things Maya Angelou says that I love, like, when you know better, you do better. And so I now know better and I do better, but I didn't have good coping skills earlier in my life. And so I just kept pushing hard, and I kept ignoring all the warning signs. So for me, self-care is actually a core piece of my practice, my life practice. And one of the things that I do in the engineering leadership class, Engineering Your Life, and we have a graduate class as well, is we look at the fact that each of us, no matter our circumstances, we get 7 days a week and we get 24 hours a day. And so you have to decide how you're going to spend those blocks of time. And some piece of that time has to be for sleep, and some piece of that time has to be to eat something nutritious to fuel your body, to work on engineering problem sets, mathematical problem sets. Not only takes brain power, it actually metabolizes energy. And so you really do need to feed your body high quality foods to be at your best, going back to that Olympic athlete analogy. So for me, I like to think of every day as a container, and I like to think of how I'm going to fill my container and how I'm going to feel depending on how I've chosen to fill it. And the analogy I make is with the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. The rocks are the things that keep us moving forward to our life goals. They're the things that are core to us in what is important to us. It could be self-care, it can be family, it can be those essential things that no matter what, you don't want to lose sight of. And so for me, I always keep a rock that my daughter painted for me. It's rainbow rocks, it's love. It's really to remind me that family and health are foremost in my life. So that rock has to be there in my container every day. And then there's the pebbles. The pebbles may be these smaller things that are moving you towards your life goals, but they obviously still take up space in your container. So if I put my rocks in first and then my pebbles, the last thing I can add in is the sand. The sand are things that we do to fill time, but they may not in fact be moving us forward towards our life goals. And we've all done it. We've all decided to numb ourselves in front of the computer and hours go by. And if you do that for the whole day, that's a container filled with sand. And at the end, it doesn't feel very good. So for me, I want to make sure every single day I get my rocks in. Every single day I make room for those core pebbles. Maybe every day is a little bit different, sprinkle those around, and then I add the sand in after. And that analogy, at least for me, is very powerful because it reminds me how important it is to keep those rocks in our life, because otherwise it's very easy that those containers just become filled with sand, and that will in fact exhaust you and deplete you. So this would be my words of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And again, highlighting that, you know, self-care, that is critical. You do have to look after yourself. And I wanted to share just about how hard it can be to achieve that. During my PhD, there were real highs. You know, some days were great. You'd get great results, or you'd hear some good news, or you were bestowed with a wonderful opportunity and it would feel great. But then there were other times where it was so hard for so long, or nothing worked. And at points I got so anxious, I found it hard to even open my email, never mind read it or respond. And it can feel really hard to see how to get from that point to a point where you can actually use these tools to cope. How do you even get from this point here of I can't even open my laptop to I can, you know, call CAPS or perhaps try a meditation. And thank you for those in the chat who've been kind of, you know, echoing with those questions of how. And it's rather like eating an elephant or a very, very large pizza in small bites. Anything is possible. So it's really about taking just a tiny manageable chunk and scaling that chunk down to however much you think you can do for each of those rocks, for example. And, you know, each problem might be quite big. It might have 25 steps or even 100 steps that need to be done in order to get you to your sort of win condition. But each of those steps is kind of small. And if even one of those steps seems too small, you can zoom in so that it even looks like a smaller step close up. An example of this is if, for example, you can't even function. You've just reached absolute burnout. The first thing to think about is kind of like that Maslow's triangle. You know, you've got to get your physiological needs, you've got to feel kind of safe, and then at the top you've got a bit of energy for that self-actualization. So you can't solve all those problems at once, but maybe you can just do one thing towards physiological health. So for example, when was the last time you ate or had a glass of water? Have a glass of water first. Then what is the next tiniest step you could do? Perhaps you're on academic probation and you don't know where to start. Don't try and solve the whole problem. Just look at a web page, or even just find the web page. Don't look at it, just find it and have it on your bookmark. And then tomorrow you can look at the web page, and the day after that you could find a contact detail, and the day after that you might send one email. Because rather like cumulative interest, which can be good or bad, even just a 1% move per day over the year will massively increase altogether. So even if it's just literally one action a day, and that action is some self-care, like brushing your teeth or having a meal or reaching out to a friend and saying, hey, you know, do you think you could call me tomorrow and encourage me while I do this email? Any step you take is a step forward. And if you just keep taking those steps, you will conquer the mountain.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
We've got, there's a number of questions that have popped up, and many of them you guys are answering in terms of managing anxiety and managing depression in the middle of having a ton of things to do, all the steps you can take, and how to take better care of yourself. There's a question here. There's several people have endorsed about how do we convince our professors to comprehend it when we can't function due to the barriers that they are not dealing with. How to communicate with them because they don't feel heard by the professors.
I think it's really important to voice concerns to the faculty. And if for some reason that's not being heard, there are other avenues. So one resource, and Sonia was one of my graduate student instructors and a phenomenal one. So there's also another, almost all of our bigger engineering courses also have graduate student instructors. And sometimes a graduate student instructor can be more approachable. So don't forget to make those your allies as well. A graduate student instructor can sometimes be the conduit up to the faculty member. I think right now we all need a lot of compassion for each other. And for me, I'm a very empathetic person by nature, but we're not always in that camp. And so I think some of the faculty are overwhelmed as well, and they may not also have their own coping skills. So I think there's this piece of just making sure we're all trying to support each other for the greater cause, which is the students' well-being and everyone's well-being. We want staff, we want our graduate and undergraduate students, and we want the faculty to all have well-being. And I think always try to start where you're at in terms of having that conversation. And I think certainly there's been a lot more awareness that has come out of COVID that I'm hoping will become the silver lining. We've really developed a number of these Empower workshops of creating inclusive classrooms, equitable grading practices, graduate student mentoring. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I think our dean is doing a phenomenal job of trying to change the culture of engineering. So I think don't give up, continue the conversation. If all of those avenues, and building on what Dr. Sonia said now, like the eating of the elephant, if those things seem too much, there's always, every department also has a vice chair of instruction. So there's always another layer for which you can seek help. And you have your ESS advisors. So you've got all of these resources and they're here for you.
I wanted to add to that and to say that, there are a lot of the students when they come to find me, they were, after they talk to me, I help them to connect it with different resources and people who can advocate for them. They are so surprised. They just didn't know these support services exist. And so sometimes I understand it takes a lot to talk to people and trying to explain yourselves and hoping that people will understand. But once you find one person, it could be a friend, it could be a GSI, it could be an advisor, or it could be a counselor. I think then if you just make that one connection, and then they will be able to allow you to see that people do care. A lot of the times I think students get so discouraged, and which I really understand. It's already challenging. Life is already very hard. So it takes a lot of courage even just to bring it up and to say, hey, this is what I'm going through. And so I think I understand that sense of disappointment or frustration, but I do think that there are help available. For example, even when it comes to academic adjustment, and there are disabled student program here on campus, and we will be able to, if you meet with a counselor or a health provider, and if it is something you're struggling with, and we will be able to advocate, for example, if you're taking a reduced course load or having more time at homework or in the exam. So there are ways, but I think what's happening is that a lot of students wouldn't even it doesn't even have that strength to go that far to say, I really need some help and this is what I need. And so I really want to honor that. Whoever shows up, I mean, in front of my office, I've had so many students say, I walked by your office 7 times. And finally, at the senior year, about to graduate, I finally decided to walk in. So that's why we're talking about these issues. And the hope is that we will get you before that you comes to that level, that sort of completely desperate or doesn't really know what to do. So like Sonia said, even just little steps, tiny little things makes a huge difference, because it's sending yourself a different message and saying, I'm worthy, I deserve to be cared about. And yes, I value my mental health and value my well-being, not just the academic performance. So giving yourself permission is really important. Sonia, you want to say something?
Yes, Christine, and again I echo all of Lisa's and Christine's thoughts about, you know, how there's many different places to find help, and just asking for help or even engaging with being open to change is a great courage. It takes a lot of effort. And I was going to follow up on that by really saying, just keep pushing those communications. You know, perhaps it is dropping a line to the GSI, the graduate student instructor, and you don't have to necessarily expect to, you know, engage a lot with them, but you're sending out info. You're constantly keeping that line of communication. You know, maybe you're just sending a little note to the faculty saying, you know, maybe it's a note on your submission box in B courses saying, I'm having some serious challenges. I'm looking for solutions, but I want you to know this is where it's at. Even if you don't get really the response you want, you're making those efforts and they will cumulatively add up together. I also wanted to mention that even if you're perhaps not getting the support you wanted through your courses, as everyone said, there is so much support at Berkeley through different channels. And especially if you have already written to a faculty member or written to a GSI, you can copy paste some of that information so you don't have to keep recreating these ideas. And if nothing else, you have a trail of paperwork to show if you then decide that you need some more, you know, formal intervention like a reduced course load, or perhaps help from the Disabled Students Program, which is also for temporary disability, not just permanent disabilities. So all of that, just keeping that communication going, keeping updates can really help with that whole process.
I think Tracy, if we go to the next slide, and I think we started talking a little bit about the next, yes. And so we're talking about asking for help, and I kind of want to acknowledge that asking for help sounds very easy, but in reality, it really takes quite a lot of courage. And so a lot of often what I hear from students is that I don't want to ask for help because that means that there's something wrong with me, that I'm weak, and nobody else has this issue, so I should just keep pushing. So what do you say to those students who are wondering about it, but just doesn't know what to do to ask for help?
The first thing I want to say is that to ask for help, and I've been on this side of it too, where it feels as though to ask for help is to show weakness, and you feel like you're the only one probably needing help. I would say that's been something that I've struggled with for a lot of my life, like knowing how to reach out and ask for help. And I think the further I got on in my academia, the less likely I felt comfortable to ask for help, because the deeper in I was, the more I felt like I must be completely alone in this. So what I can say from my own personal growth and in leadership development is that to ask for help is actually the most courageous thing you can do. And there will be someone else that will be so grateful that you asked for help, because often it means help that comes that not only is a resource for you, but someone who hadn't yet worked up the courage to ask. And so I always advocate for the asking of help, because often it results in some type of change that doesn't just benefit one student, it can benefit many students. And it can be the most courageous thing you do in your life, is to finally say, I need help. And others will be grateful that you asked as well.
I want to again, yay, Lisa. It's so true that, you think it's so scary, or maybe it won't be received well, or you have all of these sort of negative thoughts that bubble up. But rather like the activation energy of chemistry, most of the effort is just getting that reaction going. And once it starts going, then each step builds upon the other, and those chains just polymerize and go. So just like the same for us, just making that first outreach is the hardest step, and from there it gets easier. Something I found that helped me was to kind of pre-prepare a bit. So I'd get a piece of paper or grab a Word doc or a Google Doc and just write out a couple of bullet points just about what was troubling me and what I saw as the condition that I wanted to get to, the solution, the point I wanted to go to. And that might just be that first step. You don't have to share it with anyone. You just first write it down so as it's there. And then another step might be to see, what resources are out there. And then eventually maybe do a reach out and copy paste some of those bullet points. But again, it's all about breaking it down into the smallest manageable step so that you can feel you can engage to ask for help. And if that feels too overwhelming, chunk it down smaller, even if it's just taking 10, maybe a 1-minute meditation, and then just thinking of those points about, what is the top 3 things that are really bugging me right now? And even if you take that step, you're giving yourself that space, that mental framework to be able to change your internal dialogue, to change your subconscious thoughts that are sending out those negative messages that will make it easier. And again, activation energy, that first step. After that, it's a bit easier.
Christine, I wanted to add something. And I think it's more in the realm of when we get so stuck, we become depressed. And one of the things that I've spent a lot of years working in leadership and also done coaching with the horses. And one of the things that can be the greatest piece to help overcome that activation energy, right? Because sometimes you need a catalyst. And when you help someone else, you may think, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so down. And yet there's something surprising about reaching out and offering help or some type of service to someone else. And so I know for myself that whenever I find myself in that type of spiral where I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm heading into that negative space, I know the quickest way out is actually to stop spiraling inward on myself and my thoughts and to see how I can be of service to others. And it can be a really powerful piece, and it can be the catalyst in that chemical reaction. It can be that little thing that gets added that then can zip that whole reaction along. So it may be counterintuitive, and yet it can be a very powerful piece. And of course, service is part of our mission here at the College of Engineering.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. Actually, that the mechanism of depression is that from a psychological point, it is sending you a message that you are worthless and you are not capable and you won't be able to do anything. But like you said, if you actually, even just simple things, then maybe you helped out a friend or a family, you cooked a dinner for yourself, or you clean up, wash the dishes. Even those simple things is very powerful catalyst, and it's a message. Actually, I can accomplish things. I think one of the struggles that students have is that a lot of the times we don't think these small things matter. Yes, so what? Yes, I was able to get out of bed. I was able to cook myself a dinner, but that doesn't mean that what about this exam I'm having? What about this paper I'm writing? So I do really think that sometimes understanding the mechanisms of how depression works and be very strategic and smart about how to fight it. So when I sit down with my students in terms of making goals, they want to make changes, I often ask them, so what is it? How do you feel about this goal? If they say they feel about 80% and they feel confident about accomplishing the goal, I think that's not good enough. I want you to feel like literally 120%. And so it makes it so ridiculous. For example, I've got students who wanted to go to the gym, but haven't been to the gym for so many times or so many days or so many months. And so we sort of break it down. What's the first step you could do? And so literally, how about just show up at the door, in the front door of the gym and not even going in? Well, that sounds intimidating. Okay, so what about just putting out your gym clothes and taking it out, putting the shoes by the door? What about that? And then, the student looks at me and is like, are you crazy? Is that really a goal? And then sometimes it's just like something very, very simple and breaks it down into tiny little manageable steps. The same thing about studying for exams. I say, my students always say, I really have a lot to do. I don't have enough time. And instead of getting more time, I try to challenge them. How about setting a timer, giving yourself only 20 minutes to work on this? They're looking at me as like, what? Only 20 minutes? Yeah, but sometimes that to be able to actually make this thing so doable, and then you laugh at it. Even when you're so stressed and anxious about it, that is a great first step. Because if you sit there for 20 minutes and you actually make something out of it, what it does is a message that you're sending to yourself, I am capable. And you feel good because you're being productive during those 20 minutes. And so that's how you can build it up. But I think a lot of the times, and what I hear from students, particularly here at Berkeley Engineering, is that we always wanted to do more. We always want to be the best. And so no matter how much I do, it's not good enough. So that is the mentality I think we're fighting against. I do wanted to shift because I'm watching the time, but also I noticed a very interesting question and coming up during the Q&A, and it kind of maybe related to a little bit of what's going on, particularly these days with COVID and this sense of social isolation. I just want to read it out loud, and then I will give it to the panelists and even Janae, whoever wants to share some thoughts. It says, it feels like the instant gratification we're bombarded with is that numbing sand escape you mentioned, and I think that's what referring to what Lisa mentioned. I cut off all social media, TV, etc. from my life, but now it's hard to relate to my peers. My efficacy and mental health is so much better without these things, but it is lonely. What are genuine friendship, and how do you find them?
I think I'm going to, go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead, Dr. Sonia.
I was going to say, from my perspective, it's really good to help focus your channels down so you don't feel overwhelmed, but perhaps not totally close them. So for me, it's probably video games. I love Stardew Valley. Left alone, devices, I'll be, a couple of hours, easy to go into the small hours of the morning. But what I do is I just try and make it smaller. So I make a goal of, okay, I'm going to send that email today, just that one email that I needed to do that I didn't want to do at all. And that gets me just half an hour of Stardew Valley. And then I also wanted to echo about the idea here of how do you find peers to relate to? How do you find friendships that are healthy for you, for them, that feel good? And one thing I've really done is reach out to my groups of affinity, my communities who have similar things to me. So, for example, in a class, I've posted in the chat, hey, I'm really confused about these particular concepts. Maybe the GSI could hang on during the office hours and we could chat together as a group. Or, hey, I'm making a shared revision doc. Who would like to work with me on that? So I either make focus around the class itself, because then you have an automatic bunch in common with the people, and people who are suffering the same pains as you as well with that. And then also affinity groups. So, mechanical engineering, it felt quite overwhelming at points. And I joined the Society of Women Engineers, SWE. And not only then did I have the network right here at Berkeley, where I got to hear their examples, hear good tips, but then I also had the national network to connect to. So if I didn't want to perhaps share all my trials and tribulations with people who are my co-workers, I had groups out there that I could remotely connect with that just made me feel less alone. So they didn't necessarily solve my problems. They weren't necessarily my friend for life, but they were good people who supported me in my journey, even if just for a bit. And I'd love to hear everyone else's thoughts who are probably more expert around friendship and things to do.
I stay off of all social media, and for me, I have to read news, and I have to be very careful about where I get my news. I like to have this as much science behind things as possible. But for me, just energetically speaking, it's easier if I can have a visual of news, something I can read, rather than having it come in at high velocities. I like books, and I know the College of Engineering just essentially got a book club. There will be book circles, there'll be discussions. So that will be a way to connect through reading circles. And it's something that I've done with the old-fashioned book, where you read good books and you talk about them with people that you know also enjoy that. So like Dr. Sonia, looking for some of your affinity groups to create friendships for which conversations can be steered in areas for which it feeds your positive energy framework. And that can be really powerful in terms of having connection, because really that's what you're looking for, is the connection. And that can be a meaningful avenue.
I'll add to that a little bit, because I know I talk to a lot of students who are more so on the introverted side. Like they want to have friendships and they want to connect with other people, but it's hard, because it doesn't come naturally to reach out in that way. And so for some of you, it may also mean, just like we're talking about making sure you eat well, making sure that you get enough sleep, making sure you exercise, you might actually need to schedule in that today I'm going to make one phone call, or I'm going to contact, if there's 3 people that you're close to, or 2 people, that you're going to make connection with one of them, and you're going to make yourself reach out instead of kind of hanging back and maybe waiting to hear from people. So that's important as well.
Yeah, maybe I will add a little bit. This sense of loneliness, I think, is being magnified, particularly these days, given the pandemic. What I hear is that, that kind of physical isolation sometimes really makes people feel so much more distant from each other. And it's very hard for me to even imagine, like freshmen or students starting a college journey or grad school, and not being able to have that experience or that kind of opportunities to connect with each other. Like Janae said, even if it's in person, sometimes it's intimidating. And not to say right now, everything has been moved online. Even having this conversation, right? I mean, it's very personal, but we're so far away, we're an image on the internet. And so I do think I wanted to say that is something that we hear quite a lot these days, in this sense of feeling alienated and disconnected from each other. But also I want to say that it's like the conversation we're having today. Honestly, I know Sonia and Lisa, and I know Janae, but I don't know a lot of their stories. That's sort of it's a way to sort of mimic what's happening in our social interactions. A lot of times that what's posted on social media or what's being discussed, it's on the surface level communication. People very rarely actually go deeper and wanted to share a little bit about who they are, what kind of challenges they're having, and to be able to really connect on a deep level. And when it comes to communication, somebody has to take that first step. And I still remember when Lisa called me, the last year in December or something. I remember I was having a conversation with Lisa, and when I put on the phone, I was just like, wow, that really touches me, because Lisa was opening up and sharing such a personal side of who she is. And, I know Lisa, Lisa's a professor, I know her roles as associate dean, but I really never really know who Lisa is as a person. But having that conversation just really makes me feel so much closer to her personally. And now I can see Lisa as a friend because of that courage. And I think it's just a lot of the times in taking that first step and to open up, I understand, a lot of you feel very difficult. What if I put myself out there? What if I get rejected? What if nobody says anything? What if people don't care? I hear you. I totally understand. It is a risk. But on the other hand, if we keep ourselves in the shell, we don't allow ourselves to be seen, nobody will truly get to know who we are. And those risks are worth taking, because that's, even if you find one person that really listens, really cares, whether it's a friend, it's a faculty, it's a staff, a GSI, that's what makes a huge difference. All of a sudden, your whole world seems different. It's like, oh my gosh, actually somebody do care. And that can trickle such a positive change. Yeah, Lisa, I want to say.
Christine, I wanted to just add, because when you spoke of me reaching out to you with some personal story, Dr. Sonia's teaching on our leadership teaching team for Engineering Your Life. And the first thing we do is we talk about personal story. And I share my personal journey map of the things that I've gone through. So I think as academics, we kind of build a resume, but we don't ever really talk about what's behind or underneath a resume. And every week, the students get to work on these reflections, and we have leadership circles, and we have accountability partners. And so it's this safe space that we're all in together, working on this journey. And there's never a time that I'm not working on personal development. And I certainly have enjoyed, we have Marvin Lopez, we've got Sonia, we've got Tiffany Reardon. So we've got like an extraordinary team of people who really care about students. And it's an opportunity to not only explore story, but to explore maybe places where we might have thought it was weakness, but in fact, it was really strength and resilience. And then we move that through the course of a semester into leadership. And so I invite those of you who haven't explored some of these leadership classes to consider that as a place where it's a safe space to do so.
It's a perfect segue into our next one, and we're going to try to wrap up because I wanted to save some time for Janae to do a loving kindness meditation for us, and because we do feel like, through this conversation, even just on the chat, I think we put ourselves out there and feeling maybe a little vulnerable. And so I wanted to save some time for Janae to help us to do that. But in terms of where to get resources, I wanted to tell you, we don't have the place yet, but what we're doing is we're creating a landing page, a wellness landing page, where we will be able to list all the resources, including what Lisa brought up, the leadership class, because we recognize it's not just professional counseling that's everybody needs. There are a lot of initiatives that faculty and staff and students are doing promote mental wellness that we don't know about. And so we are going to build a webpage. And for now, this is the link to the satellite counseling services. And if we're going to create a web page, we'll for sure to link it from there. So keep you guys posted, and more to come. And this is, and also I heard from Sujay and Evan, and they are launching even some apps for students to use for free. And there's an app about book club, and Lisa probably mentioned just now. And also there is an app, Calmness or Headspace, and that's for more about meditation, managing anxiety. So I want to let you know the message is that we do care, and we're going to try to pull the effort together, sending the message, very strong message through the college, that we do care about you. We not only care about your academic success, we really care. We want you to feel fulfilled. We want you to feel happy, and we value your experience here at Berkeley. And the last thing about addressing faculties, we have the UC Berkeley Global Institute for Counseling and Student Mental Health, under CAPS, is working with college engineering. We're actually offering a mental health ally training program, which is going to be rolled out to the college faculty and staff. We're probably going to have a cohort this summer. Our job, we hear you. We need to change the culture, and it starts not only just by supporting students, but also we need to get this message, this concept to more faculty and staff like Lisa and Sonia. We need allies. And so that's what we're doing also. And so we want to let you know, you are not just going to be screaming into the, nobody's hearing you. We do hear your voices, and we are taking actions, and we are going to roll out initiatives. And so stay tuned. So Janae?
Yeah, and I'll to sort of add a little bit more to what you're mentioning about the resource and that resource page. There are a number of questions here that had to, and a comment that I thought was really good that was saying, too bad we don't have a way of talking to each other about these things, and even anonymously. And we have talked about making that available, creating a forum where questions can be answered by a counselor or answered or shared with each other. And so that's something that we are considering too. And I just wanted to throw that out. There's a number of questions we didn't get to, but we are going to try to find a way to get answers to these questions out to you. And I've actually answered a few of them. I've typed some answers into a couple of questions as well. So we will stay on that and get that information out. So I'll switch gears. This is a good time. How much time do we have? Well, we're stopping right in 10 minutes. Is that
Exactly.
accurate?
10. Yep.
Okay. So this is going to be very quick. A loving kindness meditation isn't really something that you can easily do in 10 minutes, but what I want to do is briefly explain what it is for people who may not at all be familiar with it, and then just guide you through the steps so you can try it out for yourself. And what we'll do is probably go through the first half of what you might do, and then I'll explain, how you would use that for the rest of the actual loving kindness meditation. But it's a type of meditation that uses words and images and feelings to evoke friendliness, loving kindness, feelings of care towards yourself and towards other people. And by generating these feelings and cultivating these feelings, it helps you in really difficult situations, like some of the ones that we were just talking about today. I mean, when you're not feeling so good about yourself, you're comparing yourself to other people, or you're not feeling like you're able to function in the way you want to function, it's easy to start putting yourself down and saying things to yourself about yourself that's not helping and not healthy for you. So in using this meditation, you're reciting phrases with an expressed intention. You're planting seeds of loving wishes towards yourself. You're expressing gratitude, not just to yourself, but also you can do this to others, to benefactors, people that you care about, who love you, who have shown love to you. And you can even start there. Sometimes it's hard for people to start by feeling love towards themselves, but it's easy to feel it towards someone else. And it could be your pet, even if it's hard to feel that towards a person because of the state of mind that you're in. Often people can get in touch with love, that sense of love towards a pet that they may have. So you can include others, or you can just do yourself, or you can go back and forth. Okay. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the first part of it. This can be practiced anywhere, by the way. You can do this alone in your room. You can do this in public spaces. You can do it in a traffic jam. You can do it anywhere, which is one of the things that makes this a really good skill to sort of make use of and try out and see if it works for you. All right, so you want to get comfortable. We're going to start with yourself, and you find a quiet place where there's no distractions. Hopefully you're in that place right now, and you can be sitting, you can be lying down. Your eyes can be closed or open, it doesn't matter, but you just want to be comfortable. You want to be relaxed. And whether you're sitting or lying down, you want your back to be straight. You want to be sort of in a straight posture. Let your body rest, soften your gaze, and let go of any worries, plans, preoccupations, all that busy stuff that our mind does, all the thoughts that we have, that we live with during the day. And then I want you to repeat these words to yourself silently in your mind, and with an intention that it's true and that you mean it. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. Pause to contemplate what these words really mean and try to get a sense of how they make you feel inside when you say them to yourself. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. And take your time when you do this. Do say it at your own pace. And the words that I'm using to guide you today, they may work well for you, or you may choose to say it in a different way. You can use your own words, whatever words resonate for you. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. We start with ourselves because you cannot show care or love for others until you can do that for yourself. You can't give of yourself to others until you can do that for yourself. Let's do it one more time. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. And as you do this, you want to take deep breaths and let it out in between. That also helps your body to relax. You can change the wording by saying, may I be filled with peace. May I be safe from inner and outer dangers. May I be well in body and mind. May I be at ease and happy. When you say these phrases, picture yourself as you are right now and hold that image in your heart in a loving way. And if you need to adjust the words, or if you need to adjust the image in any way, that's fine. If you want to see yourself as a younger person or as a child, when you were a child, you saw pictures of yourself as a child. Sometimes that's easier for someone to feel loving and kind towards themselves. But create the image and the phrase that best open up your own heart. And you repeat them over and over, and you let the feelings permeate your body, let them permeate your mind. Once you feel like you've established a stronger sense of loving kindness for yourself, you can expand this meditation to include others. And that may take several weeks of just focusing on yourself. It may take, 5 or 10 minutes before you feel like I can expand. And when you expand to others, still with your eyes closed, you want to think of someone that you care about, that you share a strong emotional connection with. It could be a spouse, it could be your parents, it could be a sibling, children, it could be your friends. And as I said, it could actually be a pet as well. But we call that person a benefactor. And it's someone in your life that you know has truly loved and cared for you. And you do the same thing. You picture that person and you recite the same phrases, but you say, may you be at peace. May you be safe from inner and outer danger. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease and happy. Make note of how you feel when you start thinking about this person who you feel so strongly about. Whether the images are clear in your mind, it does not matter. Often in meditation, images will shift and change. And just simply continue to plant these seeds of loving wishes, repeating gently, no matter what arises. You just go back to the phrases. May you be filled with peace. May you be safe from inner and outer danger. May you be well in body and mind. May you be at ease, and may you be happy. Again, you take as much time as you need to repeat the words, and just make sure you say them in a way that you mean and you can feel the meaning and feel the intention behind it. So what I'll do now is I'll have you pay attention to your breath, pay attention to the sounds in the room, pay attention to what it feels like to be sitting in the chair, or if you're lying down, that underneath what you feel underneath your body. Pay attention to the present moment. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Where you go next with this, which we're not going to do today, is you would go to your community, your group of friends, your family, and you can go out to, the country, the globe. And some people do a meditation that they focus on even the universe. So they keep expanding this sense of well-being and trying to hold on to it, trying to maintain it. It's a cultivation practice, and it helps you more easily access the feelings when you need them. And you need them when you're managing really difficult feelings that arise and when you're not feeling so good about who you are. And we all face that sometimes during our lives. So this is just one tool, one of the many tools that we've talked about today. This is one way that you can use to manage the difficult feelings and to try to change your mood state and get more functional, get more productive, and feel better about yourself.
Thank you, Janae. And
You're
if
very
you
welcome.
really, Janae's leading, she will be leading a session, mindfulness meditation practice in April. So make sure to attend that session. It will be mostly experiential, and she will explain how to use these ways to incorporate them into your life. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and have a good rest of the day.